We have had enough. Enough of the NRA and their tactics. Enough of the stranglehold the NRA has in Congress and in the Senate.
Rosie O'Donnell, preaching from the pulpit at the Million Mom March, spelling out a political agenda masquerading as motherhood, recruiting the crowd to push for more gun control, proclaiming it's all in the name of protecting children.
We want all guns registered, all gun owners to have a license. We want child safety locks.
Gun control.
Then finally admitting it's really about restricting your right to protect yourself and your family, your right to own a firearm.
There are just too many guns. It's too easy.
The police department need to have it. That's all need to have it. And you don't need no gun. What you need a gun for?
Mothers led to believe, but lied to by Rosie. Just a few weeks after the march, it was front page news. Anti-gun Rosie's bodyguard had applied for a concealed carry permit to protect Rosie and her children. Did Rosie have a change of heart? We called Rosie's office to find out.
We were interested in seeing if we could chat with Rosie about the story that's making headlines up in Connecticut about her bodyguard applying for a gun permit.
Yeah, no, she's not going to talk about that.
But don't you think it's kind of interesting that she's against guns and she wants to restrict the ownership for other people?
She's not against guns. That's not her stance.
In other words, Rosie's not against guns as long as her bodyguard is the only one who has them. A double standard set by double-talking Rosie, who just last year took to the airwaves on her own show declaring it's time to rewrite your rights out of the Constitution. Rosie said, quote, "I think they should have a law. No one can have a gun in the U.S. If you have a gun, you go to jail. Only police should have guns." And when it comes to the issue of right to carry, this past May, Rosie was asked on ABC TV's This Week if she opposed right to carry laws, and she quickly responded, quote, "Of course I'm against them. That would do more harm than good."
What gives her the right to decide what I do with my life when you're doing the same thing?
It's wrong for you or me to have arms to protect our family, but her detective that's with her, there's nothing wrong with him having a gun to protect her children. Now, why is that double standard? It's hypocritical.
No guns allowed unless, of course, you're Rosie O'Donnell or anti-gun Senator Dianne Feinstein, who once held a rare California firearms permit for personal protection. It's a hypocrisy that really hit home. Celebrities and politicians preaching gun control for the rest of us, but don't practice what they preach when it comes to their safety and their rights. They can afford to hire security guards and live behind gated communities. But for single-family mothers and for senior citizens who live alone, the right to own a firearm isn't a luxury, it's a lifesaver.
No gun control!
911 isn't there by my side protecting me. They'll respond eventually to write up the paperwork. I live alone. Nobody's going to be there to help me, except my gun if I'm lucky enough to be able to get to it.
That's the very reason these women are opposed to mandatory safety locks. They point to a recent press conference where Maryland Governor Paris Glendening couldn't remove a lock from a gun, and that was during a scripted photo op. Imagine when every second counts.
They want the trigger locks on the guns. Well, I contend that then you have a law for the criminal. When he come in to rob me, let him give me 6 minutes to take my trigger lock off.
A false sense of security and more gun laws that only disarm the defenseless. Like Rosie, these women have had enough. Enough of the false promises from politicians. Enough of the lax prosecutions. And enough of laws that never get enforced.
The federal referrals for prosecution in this administration have fallen 40%. That means we aren't prosecuting the violent criminals who are using firearms to commit crimes.
Like the young man that robbed me. He had a 25-year sentence for armed robbery, but he served only a few years, and they let him out. And then in a month or so, he was back doing the same thing.
The legacy of this administration is going to be less safety and more deaths, and if you're not prosecuting people, then there's more people on the streets that are going to commit crimes.
Even women marching with the Million Moms speak the truth when asked about the real problem, admitting that criminals like the ones who killed Lucille Dunn's son are getting away with murder.
The boy got 15 to life, the girl got 7 to 22. But that's not enough time. They shot my baby in the head, then they put my baby out on the back porch with a blanket over his head, and just like he was a piece of garbage.
The tragic reality of a failed political agenda. Families urging that if protecting kids is the real agenda, then make sure they get the education they need.
Educate. We don't need to legislate anymore. We have enough laws. If we just enforce those laws and educate and care for our children, we all wouldn't be here. We would all be home taking care of our kids.
You can teach a child not to touch a hot stove or cross a busy street. You can certainly teach them firearm safety. In my mind, that will prevent more deaths than anything else.
And this fifth grader makes it very clear that if her parents didn't teach her about gun safety, she never would have learned it.
They expect that the schools are going to do this, but I must admit that I'm in 5th grade and they haven't given us one gun lesson yet. So I think that it's important for the parents to be there to tell their kids what's right and what's not.
Putting kids' safety first, mothers and fathers, families and gun owners who won't be duped by Rosie's double standards.
The NRA, you have been put on notice. The gig is up.
Women support firearms, and not all moms are being hoodwinked by the politicians who are trying to say that the problem is law-abiding citizen.
Families well aware that this so-called Million Mom grassroots movement was choreographed from Pennsylvania Avenue.
This is completely about politics. It was organized by a friend of the Clinton administration who's Dan Rather's publicist. This is just an attempt to cram new gun control laws into the education reauthorization bill.
This is President Clinton, Hillary, Schumer, you name them. They're all out there. They're using it for their own political gain. I mean, if you want safety for kids, you educate your children.
They say we cannot defeat the gun lobby. They are wrong. We will. We must.
For millions of moms and Americans concerned about their freedoms, it's a call to action that can't be ignored.
No gun control!
That's why, for the safety of their families and their right to protect them, they plan a different march this November, a march to the voting booth to make their voices heard.
Stand up for your rights. Speak up. Don't just sit on the sidelines and let somebody else do it for you.
Maybe they ought to start listening to the NRA, because we have a lot to say as NRA women about how to handle firearms safely. We have a lot to say about education. We have a lot to say about what works and what doesn't work.
Gun owners of America, get involved before it's too late.
Protect your rights! Protect your rights!